You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, we've got some bombshell news here that involves your former office in Washington, D.C. It looks like the acting U.S. attorney in that office, who was installed by Donald Trump, his name is Ed Martin, has just fired a number of prosecutors who worked on cases related to January 6th. In total, it looks like 25 to 30 prosecutors were fired altogether. First off, can I have your reaction to this?
Yeah, 2 words, Brian. Wrongful termination. That's going to be little consolation to the wrongfully terminated prosecutors who now inevitably will very likely bring legal challenges to these terminations. They will be put through hell for the next year or two. They will probably be vindicated and earn back pay. But this kind of rampant illegality, not to mention some of Donald Trump's unconstitutionality, which is being checkmated by federal court judges, is so destructive to the fabric of the Department of Justice, the federal government, the civil service corps, and it's going to work to the extreme detriment of the safety of the American people. So, this is designed to send the message that y'all better self-select and get the hell out of government while you still can, or, we just may arbitrarily, if not unlawfully, get rid of you, show you the door without cause. There are procedures in place, Brian. I couldn't take this any more personally unless I had been fired. That was the office I retired from after 30 years as a federal prosecutor. Those are my friends and former colleagues who were given assignments to investigate the Capitol attack, follow the evidence, apply the law, and prosecute those who committed crimes. And that's what they did. And 1,600 of them either pleaded guilty because they knew they'd committed crimes or were convicted at trial by a jury of their peers. And to go after the prosecutors for doing a job that was assigned to them by the leadership of the Department of Justice is beyond effing outrageous. There will be hell to pay in the courts, but boy, these prosecutors are now going to probably have to live this hellish life, battling in the courts for the months and years to come.
Glenn, you mentioned wrongful termination. Doesn't that only apply if these people actually seek to remedy the situation in court? And I mean, let's be honest. Is everybody in this office, everybody who was wrongfully terminated, going to have the appetite to go up against Donald Trump and the federal government in court?
I can't speak for everybody who has been wrongfully terminated, but there are a number of very accomplished lawyers in Washington, D.C., who have been preparing for this, preparing to fight what we all knew was the coming illegality of the Trump administration. And I have to believe that the vast majority of people who are being wrongfully terminated will absolutely join in the fight. Let me tell you, Brian, prosecutors are generally not lay-down kind of people when they
right.
are faced with injustice, when they have uphill climbs to winning justice, usually for victims, but now they're going to have to win it for themselves. And I would expect them all to fight in the courts.
Glenn, do you think that the best course of action here that we're going to see is some type of class action lawsuit, as opposed to everybody kind of going at this one by one in these kind of haphazard, sporadic lawsuits just defending themselves?
It's a great question, Brian. I will never purport to be an expert on civil litigation, particularly class action lawsuits, because there's quite a bit that goes into seeing whether you can legally assemble a class that could be certified by the courts to satisfy the requirements of a class action lawsuit. To me, this feels like either a class action lawsuit or what I would call a de facto class action lawsuit. I have a feeling you're going to see these lawyers band together, many of them former prosecutors. These are some of the most accomplished people in the criminal defense and white-collar bars in Washington, D.C., and they will probably collect up batches of folks who were wrongfully terminated. So I'd call it kind of a de facto, an in-fact class action lawsuit, because they're all going to have a very same claim on the facts, and the same law will apply to the action that they bring. So I have a feeling that's what we're going to see in the courts of Washington, D.C. Of course, Brian, at the end of it, even think about Andy McCabe, former, I think, deputy director of the FBI, who was wrongfully terminated by the first Trump administration, one day shy of his retirement, he went into court. He fought and he won. He was vindicated, but that's not the part that Donald Trump cares about, because when they're vindicated, it's just paying out more government money to these people. He's engaged in the kind of terrorism, DOJ-wide, Civil Service Corps-wide terrorism. He's trying to terrorize these folks into getting the hell out of government.
And that's the point that I want to dig in on, because at the end of the day, even if they seek back pay for wrongful termination, Trump doesn't care about that. He doesn't care whether he has to pay them or not. It's not his money. He really doesn't care if he has to pay them or not. But at the end of the day, he wants these people out. And so isn't he still going to be successful regardless of how these wrongful termination suits go? Because payment or not, still the goal for him is to root out good prosecutors so that he can replace them with people who are going to do his bidding.
It depends on how you define the word successful. You know, I think all of the illegality and the unconstitutionality in the first couple of weeks of the Trump administration may actually backfire and hasten his political demise. I mean, if he keeps up all of this illegality and unconstitutionality, he will be ripe for impeachment. I know what everybody is saying. Not in a, MAGA Mike Johnson controlled House of Representatives are we ever going to see an article of impeachment, passed against Donald Trump. But you know what? We may in 2 years. We're always in an election cycle, aren't we? And all of this, I think, will come home to roost come the midterms. And like I say, this could very well backfire and hasten Donald Trump's political demise. I don't think that's hopium. I think that is a realistic possibility.
Glenn, in the event that these people push back on their firings, is it just financial, or is there a world where they want to be reinstated to their jobs?
It's personal. It's professional. These are folks who have been fighting for the rule of law and the Constitution without fear or favor, without concern for how people may react when they either decide to charge someone or decline to charge someone. This is a matter of principle. And I have a feeling these people, if they win a wrongful termination suit, they may very well want to be reinstated. Now, do they want to be reinstated in a Trump administration with an attorney general and an FBI director, who are Lord knows who? They may not. But then again, they may, because I think for many of them, this is about principle. It's not about money.
And finally, Glenn, what's your message to these folks? I mean, this is, again, the office that you retired in. I'm sure that you have relationships with some of the people who've been impacted, certainly the people in this orbit. And so what's your message to folks who may be watching, for example, in light of what we've just seen this Trump-appointed acting U.S. attorney do?
First, find the best attorney you can find, because they're out there and you know who they are. Band together. There's strength in numbers. And remember, the federal trial bench in Washington, D.C., many of whom are former prosecutors, many of whom are former criminal defense attorneys who also understand allegiance to the rule of law. And they also understand what it was like to fight for their clients when there was a United States government breathing down their necks and bringing all the resources of the federal government to bear against their clients. The courts will hold strong in Washington, D.C. And the good news, Brian, because we always have to go all the way up to the Supreme Court when we're talking about potential federal litigation, right? Well, I don't think wrongful termination suits are the kind of thing, once judges rule, assuming this is the way it plays out, that the Trump administration was wrong and wrong and wrong. I don't think that's the kind of thing that makes it up to the Supreme Court for Donald Trump's Supreme Court to do him another solid. So, stay strong, find the best counsel you can, assert every single right you have, and know that you have the majority of the American people behind you, because they know that you've been fighting like hell to hold the J6 defendants accountable. You've been fighting like hell to remain loyal to the rule of law and the Constitution, and we are right there with you.
Perfectly put. We'll leave it there. Glenn, again, I know this is personal for you, so I know that you will be especially focused on keeping an eye on what happens moving forward. So for those watching right now, if you want to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.